Hello and welcome back to Gractful Gaming. Only today we're not going to be playing a video game, we're going to be taking part in one of my other hobbies, brewing beer. I don't brew beer from grain. That takes a lot more equipment than I have, it takes a lot of space, it takes a fair amount of time. It is probably the cheapest way to do it, and a lot of people, it allows you the most customization, so a lot of people really enjoy it. I brew from kits like this one. This is the Moncton's Premium Irish Stout. I haven't tried this kit before, kind of interested to see how it comes out. I really do like stouts. Previously I used the Cooper's kits. They're a little bit more expensive, by about $4. This was $19, I think. The Coopers are usually $22, $23, somewhere in that range. Personal experience so far, the Coopers have been a bit better. We'll see what happens. I'm hoping this will come out better. The Coopers also require a lot more in the way of secondary ingredients. The only secondary ingredient this one specifically calls for is a kilogram or just over 2 pounds of dextrose. Pretty sure dextrose is just corn sugar. Because I really like vanilla, and I really like vanilla beers, I'm also going to be adding just a little bit of vanilla extract. Now most people would use vanilla beans, normally so would I, but I have this ludicrously sized bottle of vanilla extract, so I'm going to use this. This isn't an ingredient, but it is extremely important. Sanitizer. About a capful of this will make enough sanitizing liquid to fill up the brewing bucket. I'm going to be showing it a little later. So you don't need a lot of this, but it is extremely important. You have to sanitize absolutely everything. Because if you get a wild yeast infection, your beer might not even be drinkable. It will strongly affect the flavor, it could turn it bad, it could drive the pressure in the bottle up so high the pressure will break if it's glass. If it's plastic, as soon as you open it, it will fountain. We had a friend's batch went that way, and it was amusing. It was actually still drinkable. You had to be very careful with how you poured it. And again, not an ingredient, but very important to me. Cup of coffee, because I tend to do this first thing in the morning. The first step is to sanitize absolutely everything, like I said. I've already done that, so I'll bring you back with showing you what the basic equipment is, the brewing bucket, the airlock, stuff like that. And then we'll be back again with the actual brewing. See you soon. Welcome back again. This is a re-record of this segment of the video because the first time I tried this, I tried holding the camera in my hands so that I can get better close-up shots of the equipment. It was a bad idea. My hands shake a lot. As a result, that segment was completely unusable. So this is being filmed after the brewing is all done, and I've taken a shower, which is why I'm wearing a different shirt. So the basic equipment that you're going to need is you need a bucket to brew in. This is a bottling bucket. I'm not sure if it's on camera or not. One moment. No, it isn't. Just below the shot is a tap for turn the tap, liquid comes out. That's why it's called a bottling bucket. You can bottle directly out of the bucket. I brewed with this for quite a while, still brewing with it, because using the kits that I use, you don't really have to do what's called racking, which is moving the beer from your brewing bucket into something else like a carboy. This big glass jar is a carboy, that's full of mead. So yeah, you can do what's essentially one bucket brewing with just a bucket. You don't have to use a bottling bucket, but if you use a bottling bucket, you don't have to buy a bottling wand and a transfer system. The transfer system, if you're curious, is this. When you're ready to transfer, you put this end in the bucket, basically take the airlock off, put this down through that hole into the bucket, pull up, put the hose in the end where you want it to transfer into, push down, and it'll start transferring. It's like siphoning liquid from, it is literally siphoning liquid from one container to another, which means that the receiving end needs to be lower than the source. Bottling wand, sorry if I reach off camera, is that thing. That's a bottling wand. It's got a little nub on the end, it might be hard to see, and it attaches to the end of the hose. I'll do a bottling video and show this in more detail. Attaches to the end of the hose, you put this in the bottle, depress the nub at the end, and the liquid comes out. Let the pressure off, liquid stops coming out. Pretty simple. So if you start with With a bottling bucket, you don't need to buy this. This is another 15, almost 20 bucks worth of equipment, I think it was. The buckets, whether bottling or normal, I believe the bottling bucket is slightly more expensive, are in the $25 to $30 range. I don't remember the exact numbers. I will be including a link to the place where I buy all of my equipment. They do deliver, but I don't know what the range of their delivery is. There's a lot of brewing shops. I'm sure if you're looking to get into this hobby, you can find something local. If not, Amazon will work, but the prices, weirdly, for Amazon, the prices for beer stuff do tend to be a little high. They tend to vary wildly, even from the same seller. It's a bit weird, I know. So your basic equipment is a bucket of some kind, some way of getting the beer out of the bucket and into a bottle. So for me, I started with a bottling bucket, or you can go straight to a normal bucket, which is just the same thing, only without the spout, and a transfer system. You need an airlock, and some way to stir it. I mean, if you have a ladle in-house, you can. Ooh, that's not good. Don't mind me as I knock the airlock off of my other batch of beer. I bought one of these things fairly early on, just a couple of bucks. Stir stick. Yeah, okay, there's still enough liquid in that to function. Good. Whoops. In case you're wondering, no, that's not a colossal mistake. That tiny amount of oxygen exposure isn't going to kill it. If you're looking for an alternate method to start out, see if you're going to like this thing right here, this cask, I will show you one that's empty. It's a Mr. Beer cask. Same as this thing right here. This one's specifically for cider, but not that it matters that much. Mr. Beer sells entire kits that include this cask, a much smaller can than I used, and the bottles, my head's out of shot, sorry, the carbonization tablets, all that type of stuff. And on the front of every one of these, you attach spout. That's what's at the bottom of this bucket, essentially. If you just want to do something as a one-off, just to see if it's fun, you can do that, but those kits, they're not cheap. The kit I bought came with enough stuff to do 2 batches of beer, and this makes a 2-gallon batch, which comes out to be slightly less than a 2-4. And that cost me $60 some odd before taxes. So it's not cheap. Certainly not the cheapest way to do it. But that is an option if you're just looking to do a one-off and just or a gift for someone that enjoys beer or something like that. The equipment is, as you can tell, the most expensive part of all of this. So yeah, the basics that you're really going to need: you need a bucket, you're going to need an airlock. You can get away without an airlock if you really want to. You just leave part of the bucket open a little bit. I recommend just going directly getting the airlock. This is a basic airlock. It costs like $3 or $4. They're cheap. Might even even less than that. I don't remember the exact numbers. And since if you're brewing with kits, you can do 1 bucket brewing. If you're brewing with grain, you're going to want to transfer, and this is the wrong video to watch. I think that's basically it for equipment. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go back in time now and to the brewing process. Thanks for watching. Welcome back. I've got everything sanitized. I showed you the equipment. I did forget to show you one ingredient because it's under the lid of the Moncton's can. And underneath this thing is your packet of yeast. Very important. Household equipment that you probably already have. If you don't, it's not that expensive. A pot capable of dealing with between right around 4 liters of water, or just over a gallon, and a little more than a gallon worth of water if you use gallons instead of liters. And you need a smaller pot or a large bowl. Hold your other little bits of household stuff in. And it's also full of the sanitizing liquid. Obviously this stuff isn't completely submerged, that's fine. Just make sure it is submerged at some point, which is why I usually prep my cleaning liquid in one of my brewing buckets. Sorry I'm not fully in shot here, that's a little difficult to do without sitting on my stove, and I'd rather not. A 1 liter measuring cup is useful. You can get away with smaller. I've found it's useful. I start by getting 3.5 liters of water boiling. The actual Moncton's website, their their instructional video says to just boil 3.5 liters of water in one of these. I prefer to do it on the stovetop. I also prefer to mix my ingredients in the pot on the hot water. Not while it's actively boiling, but I bring it to a boil, turn the heat off or put it on minimum, whatever, then start mixing stuff in. That's my personal preference. I haven't actually tried the exact Moncton's method because, I don't know, I'll say this for it, it's a better instructional video than the Cooper's one is. The Cooper's one I did not like at all. It leaves a lot of things out. It's a little awkward. Also, their instructional video is buy our expensive equipment, which you don't need. Anything else for equipment that I forgot to show you? You need a stirring spoon, pair of scissors, a can opener, the can of whatever you're using, Cooper's, Moncton's, or if you're using the Mr. Beard kit, submerge it in, or at least put most of it in hot water to loosen up the syrup. Because what's in that can is condensed wort. We're reactivating it, expanding on it, that kind of thing. So you need to loosen up the syrup to make it easier to pour. I think that's all of the household stuff that you need. Now I'm just going to wait for this water to boil, and I'll be back when I'm ready to pour stuff in there. See you in a bit. Welcome back. The water's just finished boiling, so I'm about to start adding ingredients. One more thing that I find really useful, a tablet, because there is some waiting around. And sitting there watching water boil is really boring. So to start with, I like to add the dextrose first. I realize this, if you can see it says 4 pounds, not a little over 2 like I said earlier. It's because this was a 4-pound bag. Now I've used half of it in a previous batch. The recipe calls for 1 kilogram, which is 2.2 pounds. So I'm using slightly less of this than the recipe calls for. That's fine. It's just going to end up a slight bit weaker. Not a big deal in my opinion. Last time I made a Moncton's beer, it came out right around 4%. It probably wouldn't have been much higher than that if I'd have used more, a little bit more dextrose. I'm okay with that. So I add it slowly, and I keep my stir stick handy, just in case it starts to foam up. Okay, well, this isn't that slowly. But keep an eye out for a heat break. It starts to foam up. You might need to take this off the heat onto a cold burner. I actually have the burner turned off at this point because the rest of this doesn't take that long. You don't need to keep the water rolling. I've also already opened the can of Moncton's to add in a minute because you don't need to watch me use a can opener. I prefer to use a hand can opener rather than a mechanical one. I don't actually own a mechanical one, but if I did, I'd still prefer to use a hand can opener because it's easier to sanitize. And to show you what I mean by sanitize everything, I sanitize the packet that the yeast comes in. Like, I sanitize this thing. I didn't actually sanitize that plastic bag, but that's probably fine. The contents of that plastic bag got poured into boiling water, so that's probably fine. So that's already basically dissolved into that water. Doesn't take long. Sorry I'm constantly walking in and out of shot. As you can tell, based on the fact that my head keeps getting cut off, I am not actually set up to do this type of recording. And I don't know why I put that spoon away. I need that. That was really dumb. I'll be right back. Next, we're adding our syrup. Isn't that lovely? It's that dark because it's a stout. Stouts are dark. If you do a red, it's also going to be fairly dark because it's condensed. But the type of beer you're intending to come out with, the type of beer for the kit that you bought, is going to obviously color that. And it's not all going to pour out nice and easily because it is a syrup. Just get in there with the spoon and scrape it out. And you're not going to get 100%. I mean, you could pour hot water into this can to shake it up and pour more out. But at that point, you're risking burning yourself. And I don't know that it's necessarily worth it. Some people will probably tell me that you absolutely should do that. I don't. I've never done it. I don't think it's ever really affected anything. if you're curious as to how I know what the approximate percentage is, I have a hydrometer, and I just tested it. You don't really need to do that with these kits because they're all targeted to come out at pretty specific percentages, alcohol percentages. But I knew I was going to be getting into mead brewing, for which the recipes are a little less targeted. So I thought it'd be useful. And then of course I used it just to learn how to use it properly. I think I've got as much out of that as I'm going to. At this point you just stir it till it's basically all dissolved, or all thoroughly mixed in, which doesn't take long. Whoops. And make a good mess out of your stove while you're at it. That's more or less already done. I mean, this is already just liquid as opposed to syrup. You may notice a little bit of foam starting on top. That's not a big deal. I mean, I'm not getting much. It's more like just thick bubbles rather than foam. I'll probably see a little bit of foam when I pour it into the fermenting bucket, the brewing bucket. Which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned the size of. It's a 23-liter bucket, which, if you use gallons because you're in the United States, or a lot of brewers prefer to measure in gallons for, I don't know why. That's just a hair over 6 gallons. It's essentially a 6-gallon bucket. The Moncton's instructions are all in metric, so liters, kilograms, that sort of thing. Cooper's is in gallons, pounds, that sort of thing. Cost-wise, the Moncton's is the cheapest so far. That can was about $19. That big bag of dextrose was about $4 or $5, something like that. So that bag got me 2 batches, so $22-ish, $21, $22 per batch. Cooper's is around $22 per can and requires more secondary ingredients. It requires less dextrose, but it requires, well, it recommends 2 other ingredients. Dry malt extract, which is just powdered malt, and something else. I can't remember what the third thing is off the top of my head. Those all total up, you're looking at maybe another $8, $10 worth of ingredients on top of your $22, $23 cans. You're looking at $33 versus $22. It's not an insubstantial savings. That said, as I mentioned earlier, from my personal experience so far, the Cooper's has been a bit better than the Moncton's. What I may try doing with my next batch of Moncton's, when I'm brewing something I've already brewed before, I haven't brewed this stout before, is I am going to add some dry malt extract, because that, in addition to nudging your percentage up a little, alcohol percentage up a little bit, which I don't care about, honestly, and I might even be wrong on that, it might not do that, it will bring out the flavor a bit more, and that's honestly what I'm interested in. So for my next batch, I may repeat a batch I've already made and add dry malt extract to it, see if it comes out better. And this is stirred up well enough. So from here, I just add this to the brewing bucket, which before you add this to your brewing bucket, you want to add a gallon or so water, 3 or 4 liters of water, into the bottom of the bucket. I put the cover over the bucket because I don't want anything falling into that water. Probably fine. And then you pour this on top. You don't really want to pour this on the bottom. It's hot liquid, it's a plastic bucket. I mean, it's meant for food. They could almost certainly take it. But every website I've ever seen said put room temperature water in there first. Also, with regards to water, most recipes you'll see recommend using bottled or spring water or something of that nature. You almost certainly get better results out of it. I'm lucky enough that I live somewhere where what they add to my tap water doesn't prevent yeast from working. In some places they do. I can't remember exactly what the component is that's added to tap water that would prevent the yeast from working. So if you're doing this, that's something you might want to look into. That will obviously affect the cost. It also will affect the flavor, as I understand it. I've never tried it with spring water. Maybe I will someday. I don't know. I don't think there's anything else off the top of my head I need to talk about. If so, I'll bring it up in the next segment. So I'm going to stop this here, and I'll bring it right back in my brewery room with adding this to the bucket and the rest of the ingredients going in there with it. See you soon. Welcome back, and we're ready to, this is going to be a really small segment. We're ready to start bringing the extract into here, add it to the water that's already in this bucket. This is going to be short because after that, I'm going to fill it up to this ring here, I believe it is. Oh, sorry, this ring right here is the 23-liter mark, 6-gallon mark. So you don't need to watch me walk back and forth with buckets with pots of water. The pot I'm going to use for that, by the way, is the pot I was using to hold all my sanitized equipment. The things I still need are now in this, except for my yeast packet, apparently. I will add that in there in a moment, off camera. So I will be right back with that can. Sorry, I'm walking off of camera yet again. This is sat for a minute or two, so the handles are plenty cool. If you're moving it right away, be safe, use oven mitts, especially since these are a metal handle. And then I just need to, you can't tell on the camera, but it's filled up to around there, which is just under the 10-liter mark. So I need to add another 13, probably 14 or so liters of water. I'm not going to make you watch me walk back and forth with all that. I will be back for the final steps once that's done. See you soon. Okay, so it's now full of water. It's actually just above the 23-liter mark. Not a big deal. I think I actually overfilled this one slightly, the one that I'm standing in front of. Again, not that big a deal. You'll get more beer, but it'll be weaker. The taste will be ever so slightly off. But I don't think I added enough water to affect the taste of the beer. I'll be honest with you. So the last couple of things I'm adding, because I am customizing this ever so slightly, because I really enjoy vanilla stouts. Teaspoons of vanilla. Recipes I've found online again say just use a bean. Why aren't you using a bean? And that's fair. That's totally fair. If you want to use a vanilla bean, cut it open, scrape the guts out. It's recommended that you do that in a small dish of sanitizing fluid. A lot of people also just use vodka. That's flavorless. It's also clean. It'll also help clean the outside of the bean. And then dump the husk, the guts, and the liquid, especially if you're using vodka, just directly in. Vanilla beans are a bit of a pain to get for me. This is easier to get, and I have no idea when I'm ever going to go through all this. I bought this to add a few teaspoons full into here. When I have seen websites that do talk about how much vanilla extract to use, they recommend around a teaspoon per gallon. My hands shake, which means that I'm not going to get accurate teaspoons. I'm going to get some overflowing directly in there, so I'm only going to aim for about 5. Case in point. It's already on my hand, and so I'm pouring directly in the bucket. Okay, that was actually quite a bit poured out of that last one, so I'm going to stop at counting 4. And now I have vanilla all over my hand, which will smell great, but probably get a bit sticky in a minute. That's fine. Ooh, wow, yeah, that is a strong vanilla smell. Gigantic stir stick that I sanitized earlier. Give the whole thing a stir, whether you add anything extra to it or not, give the whole thing a stir. You don't need to do a lot. You've already stirred it quite a bit by adding, when you're adding the water, it makes it up pretty well. Unless you somehow added the water all entirely in one pour. I had to walk back and forth 4 or 5 times to get this to all topped up. That's probably fine there. Oh, excuse me. My nose is running ever so slightly. It's kind of annoying. Now, the last thing we need to add is our yeast. For those that are wondering, yeast doesn't always come in a little foil packet like this. You can sometimes buy it in small jars. You can sometimes buy it in a plastic packet. This is dried powdered yeast. It guarantees a certain amount of live cell count, but it's essentially dehydrated yeast. You can also buy live yeast in a plastic packet that's a liquid. Moncton's comes with this, and it's fine. I've used this quite a lot with both Moncton's and Coopers. No problem. Now we just sprinkle the packet on top of the liquid, and we do not stir. We just let it sit on top. It will do everything it needs to on its own. And we put the lid on. Takes a fair amount of, a little bit of effort to get the lid on onto these buckets. It's all more annoying to get it off. Okay, that's on there. And now we add our airlock, which is 2 pieces. 3 if you count the rubber cork. The main body, a little thing that sits in there, and the rubber cork. Make sure it's in there getting tight. A lot of people will use water for this, that's fine. A lot of people use sanitizing liquid, that's also fine. That's what I'm going to use. This liquid isn't going in the beer. It's preventing air from getting in the beer. You want to fill it up to around that there. That's probably really hard to see. You want to fill it up about halfway up the plastic thing. Again, I'm not actually set up for recording like this in home, so I apologize for the bad camera angles and the unnecessary width and no zooming and stuff like that. If you're curious, yeah, I collect beer mugs and the like. So that is it. That's pretty much the whole process, start to finish. The finish is not technically done, but I'm not going to make you watch me clean. So from prep to finish and clean up, it typically takes me a little under an hour, maybe less. I've got it down pat by now at this point. To go over costs again real quick, if you just want to try things out, you're a little curious, maybe you're not going to do it long term, the Mr. Beer kits, Canadian run between 60 and 70 bucks. Sometimes they get a lot higher. The price tends to vary wildly on it. They come with this thing, 11 of these, which is enough to bottle all of that. These are 740 milliliters, by the way. No clue what that would be in Imperial. Sorry. That's just under 3/4 of a liter, if that helps. They come with carbonation tablets because you carbonate in the bottle when you do this. You're not carbonating in the bucket. There is gas escaping, but it's not carbonating. It comes with a small can about half the size of the can I was using. It's actually a lot. It's actually a little less than that, because this makes 2 gallons, this makes 6. And the refill cans for that vary wildly in price again. The lowest I've ever seen them were about 22 bucks. I've seen them 36. I've seen them 90. It all depends. It's very, very weird. So it's not a very good long-term way of brewing. If you live in Australia, that might be very different because Mr. Beer is from Australia. So is Coopers. Coopers owns Mr. Beer. The price on Mr. Beer tends to be a little bit more stable. And if you're using only the recommended ingredients, and you are using all of the recommended ingredients, then Mr. Beer is going to start out the can at around $22, is my experience, and add another, depending on which one, anywhere from $5 to $8 or $9 worth of secondary ingredients. It's not too bad. To give you a bit of reference as to exactly what that means, I have to walk off camera for a second, I apologize. Yes, I do still buy beer, even though I brew my own. I don't buy nearly as often. What's in this bucket is the equivalent of 61 of these, 61 bottles of beer. So, also when I'm talking prices, I'm talking Canadian because I'm Canadian. If you look at around $32, say at the high end, for 61 bottles of beer, that's over 2 2-4s, that's pretty good. I bottle into 500 milliliter bottles. I get roughly 44 of these out of there. So you're looking at 44 cane cans, if you want to think of it like that. The Moncton's, the can is a little cheaper, $18 to $19, and I pay, like I said, I think it was about $4 for that big bag of dextrose. It might have been 5, I can't remember. let's round it up a bit. Say it cost me $22, $23 per batch. That's a pretty significant difference if I'm only using the recommended ingredients. Like I said, so far the Cooper's has been a little bit better, but it is more expensive. So that's a decision you have to make on your own. You can vary these recipes, like I did. I added some vanilla. You can add to the Moncton's, you can add the dry malt extract if you want. And I may try that. I am definitely going to try that. I want to see what the difference is. Because even if that works, the dry malt extract with the dextrose, I'm still going to be ranging a little less than the Mr. Cooper's. And if that brings the flavor up to parity, that's probably the way I'm going to go. Now, the Cooper's being the more expensive option, again, might change depending on where you live. In Australia, they're probably cheaper than Moncton's. Moncton's comes from somewhere in England. I'm not sure exactly where. I believe it's England. It might be somewhere in the greater Great Britain area. You get the idea, though. And I think that more or less wraps it up. All we have to do now is wait 2 weeks for this in the bucket. You can, if you want, use a hydrometer, which is this thing here, to take the initial gravity, which should be around the 1050, 1040 range, somewhere up there. Essentially, you put this in here, fill it with liquid till it floats, and take the measurement. That's your initial gravity. And then every few days, you can test the gravity again, and once you go 2 or 3 days and it hasn't changed, you can bottle that if you want. I can't be bothered with these kits. I did it once just to make sure I knew what I was doing with how to take gravity. And honestly, I can't be bothered because these kits are targeted to very specific percentages. So unless you're highly customizing your recipe, it's always going to come out the same anyways. So I don't bother taking the gravity. I know it's going to come out around 4-5% area. It's probably meant to come out at around 4.5, honestly. And I think that sums up the video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was somewhat useful. I enjoyed making it. Until next time, have fun and drink responsibly, even if it's homemade. Just a short addendum to the video. What you're looking at there in the close-up, really terrible close-up, I apologize, is the airlock that I had to clean up that I showed you earlier in the video where the gas buildup was such that it pushed it up out of the airlock. I own 3 airlocks, so since one wasn't in use, all I did was prep one, pulled that one off, stuck on the one that I had prepped, filled up with liquid. If you only own one airlock and you have to leave it off for a minute or two while you clean it up and re-sanitize it and put it back in, not a big deal. Just prep your sanitizing liquid ahead of time, that's all. And as you can see, that bubbling is the excess gas escaping. Pretty straightforward. You won't always see that, honestly. There will be times you might only see small bubbles. That's fine, don't worry too much. When I first started doing this, my first batch was still. It was very still. It came fine. It came out perfect. Then my second or third batch overflowed even worse than that previous one did. So, like, it was a big deal. I was sitting there watching it all day. It was kind of amusing. But yeah, that's normal activity. Kind of amusing. Thought you might get a kick out of it. And that will be it this time, I promise. Again, have fun and drink responsibly. Good day.